Welcome to Zestful Aging, where I interview inspiring, fascinating women who are navigating aging with class and sass. I'm your host, Nicole Christina. Today we're going to talk to Kerin Rigney. She is the mother of four, and she is a town board counselor in DeWitt, New York, which is a town, a lovely town right outside of Syracuse. She's also a teacher of English as a second language and has done this in some different roles. I was reading, Kerin, that you've taught university students and also Japanese businessmen. Is that is
Yes.
that true?
Yes. Business people. Yes.
It's a
Absolutely.
business, yes. Okay, and that's a different. Those two are pretty different audiences, I suspect.
Yes. And in fact, I spent most of my career teaching French. And so in the last 10 to 14 years, I got into the English as a second language for business. So it's specifically for business.
I see. So I'm guessing that there's particular words that you have. Did you have to learn certain very technical business terms to teach to these Japanese business people?
Yes, absolutely. When I'm teaching business people, we discuss all the things that they need to be able to talk about in their business, like negotiations, like procurement, you know, office management, and then things they might talk about when they take their client out to lunch, do small talk and things like that. So, yeah, I've had to learn all about business, and I actually have always been fascinated with business. I find it an intricate art. And so it's been a pleasure to learn all about it and to interact with these people. And I always learn from them. So that's the great thing about my job.
Yeah, I would imagine that there's certain subtleties, right? When you're negotiating across cultures, you have to be pretty nuanced. I'm guessing.
Oh, well, if you know anything about Japanese culture, business culture is extremely full of etiquette. And it is etiquette that is very strict, and it is completely different than how we deal with etiquette. Like, for example, when you're dealing with someone in business, you don't look at them in the eye. That's considered to be
Oh,
rude. And so they learn that that is considered rude in our culture, that you should look people in the eye in our culture.
oh
So
my goodness.
so it's interesting, and when you offer a business card, that's a fascinating thing in Japan. You have to carry it by the corners with your fingers, and you have to treat that card as if you're holding that person in your hand.
Oh
And
my
and
goodness.
so the Japanese come here and they get really upset when they see people at conferences just passing out business cards like it's a playing card. And so they don't so they learn how business card etiquette is very different than theirs is.
And how did you prepare for this? It doesn't sound, it's not something you can just, I don't know, do you pick up a book or how did you prepare for this? It's a whole different world.
I've always been very interested in different cultures, and that's always been a passion and fascination of mine. I was very thrilled to be able to work with the Japanese, and I worked at the English Language Institute. Okay, so this is a program through the English Language Institute at Syracuse University,
Mm-hmm.
and they provide you a certain amount of cultural background. But a lot of it I learned just by speaking to my Japanese students. They would explain to me, and it's a good exercise in English for them to explain these things. They would explain to me how the way they do things and how they're different than what I'm teaching them.
Wow, it sounds so much more, much more of a rich experience than just here's the word for procurement or contract. Yeah, it sounds fascinating. So I think one of the things we talk about on the show is how women are reinventing themselves and being curious about how they want their lives to be after they've reached a certain age. And part of that, of course, is if they have had kids, launching their kids and sort of negotiating that whole thing of not being maybe a full time mom anymore. And we were talking before the show, and you have an interesting kind of mishmash of launching, sort of partial launching. Could you tell the listeners a little bit? You're a mom of four. Could you talk a little bit about what your kids are doing and how that relates to your living situation?
Oh, sure. I would love to. I always love a chance to brag about my kids. So my oldest daughter is living with us at the moment only because she has a seasonal job. She works as a hotshot firefighter in the West.
This is so amazing.
Yeah, she's a pretty amazing person. So she's been spending the winter here with us, going to the gym every day, lifting weights. She had been very much into weightlifting and bodybuilding. And she's the only female on her crew of 20 people. So the hotshot firefighters are the ones that they're a very elite group and they do a lot of the more difficult wildfires out west. And, you know,
There have been a lot of them.
Oh yeah, she's been very busy. I try not to think too hard about it because her job is really dangerous, and
Mm-hmm.
I've seen the pictures that she's taken, and she's standing in front of a wall of fire. It's just,
Mm.
as a mom, I try really hard not to think about it. But, she spent a lot of years sitting in an office and she wasn't happy with it. So, this is something she just loves, is passionate about. So I'm very happy for her. And, she's 27 now, and she and I we get along really well. I'm really happy we're at this good place. So she's like a friend now.
Mm-hmm.
So my second daughter, Mia, she lives in Austin, Texas. She is an engineer in industrial and systems engineering in aerospace company.
Mm-hmm.
She's this petite 25-year-old. She looks very young, but she's a fireball, and she leads a team of 15 men engineers.
Oh
Um,
my goodness.
I know they're all middle-aged engineers, and and that's been a learning curve for her. She's called me up and saying this is much harder than I thought it would be.
I
So,
bet.
but she is. She's doing great, and she comes home whenever she can. She was here for Christmas, but I don't see her as much as I would like to. I have gone out to Austin a few times to visit her, so
Mm-hmm.
so she's fully launched.
Yeah.
um, my son, Sam, who's 21, he just came home at Thanksgiving time from the Air Force. He spent a few years in the Air Force, and now he's home and he's trying to figure out his life. So he's looking for a job, and so we don't really see when he's going to be um, launched yet. He's
Mm.
still in process. And then my youngest, Claire, just went off to college. She's studying engineering like her big sister at Binghamton University. And
Mm-hmm.
she's perfectly um, launched in that way. But, in the fall, my husband and I thought that everyone was, off. Everybody was gone. And,
Right.
and for 2 weeks, we were like, yay, we're empty
Next
nesters.
phase. Ready for the
Exactly.
next phase.
Exactly. So we were like, yay, and then somehow we got roped into taking an exchange student. Now we didn't plan on taking an exchange student because, there's no kids here for the exchange student to hang out with, but they couldn't find a family, so we took her. We said, okay, and she stayed with us for about 6 weeks. But then I had a re-election campaign I had to do,
Mm-hmm.
and we said, it would be much better if you went to the next family because we just couldn't spend any time with her. We were
Where
just
was
too
she
busy.
from?
She's from Austria,
Uh-huh.
and she's with her second family. She's very happy. They have 3 children her age, so it's a much better situation. But anyway, we only had 2 weeks alone, and then after she left, my son came home, and
Oh
and my
boy.
firefighter daughter came home. So you know, it was nice while it lasted. We just knew that we had to kind of wait a little longer before um, we're fully empty nesters.
I think your experience is very relatable. That many people are finding that kids don't launch the way maybe we used to think about it. You know, sometimes they come back right after college when they're looking for jobs, or maybe they're living in the basement because they have student loans or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
it's a little bit more murky than I think it once was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my kids make jokes all the time about living in the basement.
Yeah.
Two of my children didn't go to college because they were really terrified of student loans, unfortunately. But that is the sign of our times. And the other two are figuring it out. But yeah, that's I think that happens more and more. I hear a lot of my friends dealing with the same thing.
It sounds like you've been pretty flexible too. I mean, you kind of got set to do this new phase, and then 2 weeks later, things changed again. Sounds like you're pretty good at, sort of flowing with it.
Well, interestingly, when I was growing up, I have nine brothers and sisters. So my mother was a single mother of 10 kids,
Mm-hmm.
and there was really no choice. You left and you didn't come back. And
Mm-hmm.
so I always, as a parent, I always thought that's the way you parent. You push them out. You say you're on your own. But my husband's sister, who's a bit older than us, she had a situation with two of her kids, and we watched how wonderfully she managed it, and she was flexible, and it worked out really really well for her and her kids. It was a difficult time for them. They came back, and they her son had a baby while he was in college, and so but I watched how they didn't take a hard line. They said, "Fine, we're going to watch your baby while you finish college," and
Wow.
that was a really great thing for us to observe, as parents. I think as parents, we don't. It's really important to watch and learn from other parents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and maybe not feel so alone.
Not alone, and see how you can be a loving parent, even to your adult children, and help them out where they need it.
Yeah, that's lovely.
Hello, Zestful Agers. A short intermission to thank you for the incredible amount of downloads. I love creating this podcast, and it's so satisfying to know that you are enjoying it too. Creating and hosting Zestful Aging has been a blast, but it does require a lot of time and resources to deliver a high quality interview to you every week. So I've signed up with Patreon, which is kind of like Kickstarter, but for ongoing artistic projects. Unlike Kickstarter, the donations are recurrent and the amount is usually smaller. When you become a patron of Zestful Aging, you will receive special benefits like behind the scenes info, a place to communicate with other listeners, as well as other patron only bonuses. These funds will be used to make equipment upgrades, particularly for mobile interviewing, and to travel to interview guests, like to New York City to interview participants in the Diversity Fashion Show. I also need to hire a professional editor. So please go to patreon.com/zestful aging and make a small but vital donation. Thank you for contributing to the ongoing success of Zestful Aging, and I can't wait to bring you more juicy, inspiring interviews. Now back to the show.
Yeah.
Um, do you want to talk at all about your political life? I'm curious when that started, and
Sure.
how you got into that.
I got into that about maybe 6 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago. My kids were all, older. My youngest was 13. And I suddenly realized that I was not in the trenches, as deeply as I had been before. I don't have any family who lives nearby, so everything was always on me and my husband. We really didn't have any support. And so raising younger children was really intense. So when my
Mm-hmm.
youngest got to be 13 and she didn't have a lot of needs, and we live walking distance to the school, so the schlepping wasn't as intense. But I've always been really interested in world events, in politics. I just really, and I'm passionate about helping people. And so when she got to be older, I decided to join our Democratic committee here in our town. So I started going to the meetings, and before I knew it, they started telling me I should run for office. And I'm
I bet
going,
that was a
wait,
surprise.
that was a total surprise. I'm like, are you crazy? Because I had no like official background in it. I just knew a lot about it, but honestly, I didn't even know that much about local politics because they were asking me to run for local office. So I kept saying no. That's absurd. And then and then one of my friends died, and he was not old. He was in his 40s, and I was at his funeral. And
Mm.
I walked out of the funeral, and I noticed there were some messages on my phone. And I listened to the message, and it was from the chair of our committee, and she's saying, Kerin, I know that you don't think you're ready for this, but I really think you're ready. And I would really strongly urge you to run for town board. And at that moment, I had been thinking about life and how unpredictable it is, and how life is short. And it just hearing that message, I said, you know what? Why not? You know? And so
Perfect timing in
it
a
was.
way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I decided to do it, and shockingly, I won. I say shockingly simply because I'm not a very extroverted person. I'm not a very social person, but I was able to get out there and win the election, and I just won my reelection. So
I saw that. Congratulations.
thank you. My daughter came up to me and she said, "Mom, you won a reelection. I guess the first time wasn't a fluke."
Oh, the imposter syndrome. Yeah. Thank
Yeah,
you very
really.
much.
Yeah.
And you've lived in, I know that you talked about your interest in the world and different cultures. And in fact, I know you've lived in France for a while. Is that one of your favorite places, favorite
Oh,
cultures?
it is. It is. I love France.
Yeah.
I'm a Francophile. I belong to a French group. I attend once a month. A group of lovely people who just all love French too, and we speak French. And um, I lived in France for 3 years, and one of those years was with my 4 children.
Mm-hmm.
And that was fascinating because we were able to really live like French people because they went to school. We, lived in a neighborhood. We got to know a lot of people. They would invite us to their homes and their parties, and it was really a great experience. But living in Europe, we also lived in Germany for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
But that really helped us understand how the rest of the world, at least in Europe, how they do things differently and think differently. I really think that everyone should have the opportunity or hope um, to try to get the opportunity to step out of their own world and culture and be able to look at it from a different angle.
Mm-hmm.
Because that really has helped me understand our own culture here in the U.S. So it's been a fantastic experience. And
Mm-hmm.
I work right now with a lot of people in Italy and France, and I'm always learning from them. different
So you
ways.
have these, these really lovely stories about how things, what you're interested in, what you're curious about, what you're passionate about, that kind of that make you tick. It sounds like the culture, certainly your family, your teaching. Have there been any challenges for you since, being let's say a certain age, anything going on that you've had to negotiate as you've gotten more mature?
I'm sure. I mean, when your children start to become young adults, your relationship goes through a change. You are having to transition from them being under your wing to them not being under your wing,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to kind of figure out what that relationship is. Um, so my daughter Mia moved to Austin, and she's not a big telephone person. She's very intense in her work and in her world there. And so it's like she disappeared. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm always trying to reach out to her and call her and because the worst thing you want is for your kid to think you forgot them. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and I and I want to form this relationship as adults. My oldest daughter, since she came home, it's been great. She and I have found that new relationship. You know, this is the first time she's come back home since she left when she was like 18. So it's been almost 10 years since, she and I lived in the same house. So it's been a great experience for her to come back. And now we have found this new relationship.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm working on that with all my kids. My youngest, of course, just went off to college, and I still think of her as under my wing, but she's trying very hard to get out of that.
It's like you have now different versions of the children you raised almost. You have to reacquaint yourself
Absolutely,
somehow, yeah.
absolutely. They're not little children anymore. You can't just tell them what to do, and um, it's I'm kind of a little bit of a I would not say I'm a helicopter parent at all. Okay, I've never been a helicopter parent, but I can be a little overbearing sometimes. I recognize that. And when they're young adults, they don't have to take it. It's like I don't have to do this, Mom.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And the raising is done, right? I mean, you put your work in, and the rest might be crossing your fingers.
oh gosh, it sometimes really is. We're struggling with that right now with my son because he's right now he's at home and he's trying to figure out what he's going to do next. And my husband and I are like, oh well, we've got all these ideas for you, and
Yeah,
it's not necessarily what he wants to hear. So it's tricky. It's tricky with that.
tricky. And you said before the show that you're celebrating your 32nd wedding anniversary.
Yes, yes, in
Wow,
February. In February. So
wow.
yeah, it's been we married in when we were in college. So it's been a long, long marriage. And we also have been going through the transition. Um, and I have to say though that the transition of the kids, launching has been a really positive thing. He and I are
Mm-hmm.
both like really, we like each other a lot. My husband and I, and
Mm.
we'd like to do things together. And so the launching of the kids was something we both were, looking forward to spending more time with each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, that's right. Good news, bad news. They want to come back, but you'd like a little room too.
Yeah, I didn't realize how stressful it was to see a bunch of shoes at the front door.
Oh,
um,
yes.
I, I didn't. I'm learning a lot about myself, really, because I spent many years raising kids and living in a certain degree of chaos. And then they slowly went away, and I started seeing more order around my world, and it made me feel more peaceful. And then when they came back, I have this mountain of shoes by my front door,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm tripping over them, and it's causing me a lot of stress, and it's interesting to me to learn what physical chaos around me, how it affects me. And I didn't
Mm-hmm.
realize it before because it was just a state of being before.
Right. You didn't maybe know any different, or you're just so used to it, and now you have a different aesthetic that you've experienced that you like. Yeah.
Absolutely. I really
Mm-hmm.
like not having to wipe off the counters every time someone else eats.
Mm, right. It's those little things that can
Yeah.
really bug us.
Yeah.
Any other, you talked so eloquently about, negotiating the parenting and, the partnership with your husband. Anything else that's been surprising as you've gotten older that, perhaps you didn't expect, but anything come to mind
Oh, yeah.
where, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I was thinking about this. I thought about this a lot. Is that after I got elected the first time, and I started like, I just jumped in with both feet when I got elected. I'm like, okay, I got elected to, and the voters are, expecting me to represent them and help them with things they can't do themselves. And so I just jumped in with both feet and I started doing all this stuff, and I realized that this was the right place for me, and I didn't realize, it was a big surprise, really. I didn't know that this job would be so fulfilling. Uh,
Oh,
and
so
and
well suited.
right, I would have never. First of all, I would have never run for office had I not been really coaxed into it. And then when I got there, it was terrifying, of course, because, it's a job I had never had before and I had a lot to learn. But when I got there and I started doing all this stuff and I felt like I was making a difference, I was like, wow, this is where I should be. And it was a big surprise. So I would say that it's important sometimes to try things, especially, I knew in my whole life I was interested in politics and world events, and I didn't ever see myself in that world. But if there's something your listeners are interested in after, and if they have the chance to step into it, I think they might be surprised to find a place that they find really, really happy and fulfilled,
That's such a beautiful example of what this whole podcast and also my course is about, is really kind of growing into yourself, having the time and the space to say, okay, my major mom duties are lessened or gone or whatever, and now what am I going to make this time look like? Because as we get to be older, we know that there's more time behind us than there is, and it becomes so important, right, to say, I better make this count.
Yeah,
What's
yeah.
what do I really want to do? And you've just clicked into that so beautifully.
Thank you. I have to say, my when I got elected the first time, my daughter Mia, she said something really interesting to me. Um, she said, Mom, I am so proud of you. And I'm so happy to see that you're doing something with your life that you really like, as opposed to constantly following your children. And she said, it's so great to see you have a life outside your children. And that was from my
Wow.
daughter, you know. So my kids have been very proud of me, and that means a lot to me too.
Oh, wow, what an opportunity to grow, outside. And I think, women too, I mean, we, for the most part, we take this mothering thing very seriously. We want to do it well. We want to raise our children to the best of our ability, and it is all time consuming, all energy consuming.
It is.
It really is hard to do, um, you know, to really discover other parts of ourselves.
Well,
Um,
we suppressed it for a long time to a certain extent, right? I mean, when you're
mhm,
raising kids, what else can you do?
mhm, mhm,
And I have to say that when I was raising my kids, there were 3 years when we lived in Europe that I did not have an outside job. And I have to say that was hard because, I mean, it's not easy being a working mother. Not at all. Not by any stretch. But being an at home mom has its own challenges
mhm,
where you don't have that part of you that's separate outside of motherhood that you're developing. And and I felt like my brain was atrophying,
mhm.
honestly. My kids were very small and we would do a lot of things together, but I wasn't developing a separate part of me at that time, and I found that very difficult.
And I think there's a dirty little secret, and my clients will talk about this in the privacy of the therapy office, but sometimes mothering and parenting can be pretty tedious. I mean,
Yeah.
there's this like, okay, what are we doing now? We're eating, we're sleep.
Yeah.
It's a lot of monotony. I mean, you adore your kids, but there's times when it's just like, my friend calls it being, is it a scully maid or on those ships, you just, here's your food, I'm
Yeah.
cleaning you up. And, you do, there's a certain numbness that comes like, are we eating now? Are
Right.
we now? So people don't often say that out loud, but I think there's truth to it.
I have to say that, one thing that helped me was I used to take my kids to the library all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the discovering the wonderful world of children's books that I would not have discovered if I hadn't had children. And that really was great for me. I felt like I was able to indulge a little bit in art while I was
Ah,
at the same time raising my kids and helping them become readers.
yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I haven't heard that. Now, I just have to say, I think our listeners would want to hear this, but I do have to ask you about the march. And um, I saw on Facebook that you were at the march in Seneca Falls. Is that right?
Yes,
And
yes.
could you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. So I actually I went to Washington, D.C. last year, and I brought my youngest daughter with me. And that was really intense, and we decided not to go back to Washington this year.
Mm-hmm.
Seneca Falls was lovely. It was beautiful. And I brought my oldest daughter this time. And my husband came also this time. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, and I like to say that I want to be counted. That's why I show up to these marches. Because after living in Europe and seeing the power of the people, they like to show the power of the people in Europe. And everybody in Europe to a large extent is on the same page that it's important for them to show the power of the people.
They have
Um,
a better voter turnout. Am I right
oh,
about
yeah, I
that?
think everywhere does.
Okay.
But yeah, I really want to be counted as one of the many people who attend these marches to show that we are here, we're not going away, and we're not going to stand for our rights being trampled on. As women, as human beings, as American citizens. And I do believe that the marches are symbolic, but at the end of the day, if people don't vote, that's the real power we have. And so I like to encourage people to vote. The sign I carried in Seneca Falls said, "If you don't vote, you're part of the problem."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my daughter, she didn't necessarily agree with that sign, but I do feel strongly that if you don't vote, you're giving away your power to someone else, and
Mm-hmm.
you're not really steering your own country. So the march was beautiful. There were lots and lots of people, a lot of fun signs.
Mm-hmm.
interesting signs. That was great. And the speakers were amazing. Really,
Oh,
really inspiring.
and what a place to march, right? I mean, we're fortunate that we're not that far away from the sort of the center of all that historical activity.
Yes, we were. Unfortunately, we were disappointed that the Women's Rights History Museum was closed because of the government shutdown.
Oh, that's ironic.
It was very ironic. My husband wanted to go in, but we couldn't because it was closed. So yeah, it is really really special that we live so close to that area. In fact, on the way home, my daughter and I were like, "We're only an hour away. We should come here more often."
Oh,
you know.
wow. Yeah. How was it for your husband being there?
My husband has always said that he's a feminist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's a really good guy, and he really agrees that things are not the way they should be. Um, when women are not paid the same amount for the same job, it's kind of crazy. And the fact that we haven't passed the ERA is mind-boggling. So my husband and I, we feel the same way really about it. He's always ready to go out there and protest as well.
It's a family affair.
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. You've really illustrated just this coming into yourself, as a grown woman and living richly and with a sense of purpose that I think we all are striving for. Um, are there any last pieces of advice that you might have for women who haven't quite clicked into these paths like you have yet, that they're still new at it? They're still wondering, okay, how do I do this now? I know things are changing fast, but I'm not quite sure. It's like that what now question. Do you have any words of wisdom for women who are um, still exploring?
I guess I would say that try different things. That there's not a shortage of opportunities to experience things around. There's all kinds of classes out there. There's all kinds of groups. If you're even like in a tertiary way interested in something, go to it, and I think people will be surprised what they find. It may be something you think will be okay, and you find out it's fantastic and it's what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
There's really, and if you are needing to do something that is bringing in money as well, the first step is to go experience something with it. Talk to everybody and just explore. Don't be afraid to leave your house and try something. I think that's really really important. And in fact, I try to tell my kids that, because even if you don't know what you want to do next, you won't figure it out by sitting home.
So you're talking about, and this is what the positive aging research talks so much about, is having a sense of engagement
Hmm.
and curiosity that it just keeps us alive and lively.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah,
There's a whole
yeah.
world out there, and I believe everybody is put on this earth to do something, and something that fulfills them in a passionate way. And and we don't always know what it is, but we won't find out if we just sit home.
Mm-hmm. That's lovely. Karen, thanks so much for talking to me today and sharing your really interesting experiences, and it's just such a beautiful example of really coming into yourself. And I think our listeners are going to really appreciate that. So I just wanted to thank you again for taking the time. I know you've got a lot going on.
Well, thank you
Um,
for inviting me. I appreciate it.
yeah, it was really fun. Just
Thank you so much for joining us on Zestful Aging. I love to hear from my listeners, so send me an email at NicoleChristina.com and tell me what you'd like to hear more about. I would also greatly appreciate if you could hop on iTunes and rate the show. Ratings help other people find the podcast so I can share all these good, juicy interviews with others. I would also invite you to become a patron of the Zestful Aging podcast. Hop on over to patreon.com/Zestful Aging and consider making a small donation. You will be eligible for insider-only goodies and behind-the-scenes information, and it'll help you feel good knowing that you're contributing to the Zestful Aging podcast. I'll look forward to sharing more juicy interviews next week on Zestful Aging.